If you've been told you have hip bursitis, there's a good chance that the diagnosis is wrong. In fact, hip bursitis is one of the most overused and misdiagnosed labels in orthopedics. And here's the problem. A diagnosis is just a symptom. It doesn't tell you why the pain is happening or what to do to fix it. So today I'm going to break down the real reason why most people get this bursitis diagnosis and why injections, massage, and even strengthening fail over and over again. Because pain, when you feel, is only the end result, and the real problem is happening somewhere else. And once when you understand that, you can really fix your hip pain for good. So why is hip bursitis overdiagnosed? Well, a big reason is because you go and see a doctor and they want to basically do a testing or imaging or things to give them the diagnosis, but it doesn't really tell you what's going on. And so if they go in and they're not really sure, like, okay, it's not really showing anything, or you go and you get an MRI and it just shows inflammation in the tendons, then they're basically going to tell you it's hip bursitis, especially if you have pain on the outside of the hip. And so the only thing that they give you options for is let's inject it. Like, let's do PRP injections, let's do steroid injections. Like, that's what they have to offer. And it's because they're not really sure what's going on. They don't really have any answers for you. They don't know how to solve the problem because, remember, I always say a diagnosis is just a symptom. It doesn't give you a game plan. And so when you get the diagnosis of hip bursitis is just a symptom. And that is not what is really going on. That is the symptom of many things that could be going on. And we're going to talk more about that here in a second. So why does this happen? Why do we get the hip bursitis diagnosis? Why do we get that pain in the outside of that hip? Well, there's a lot of reasons. So the big reason is, and again, it's kind of the symptom of what's going on, is you'll get pain in that TFL. The TFL attaches in through the pelvis up here at the top of part of it, and the muscle part attaches into the hip bone that's on the outside of that hip. And then you have the IT band that runs down through here. So this part of the muscle will get super tight. You will also get all your deep hip rotators that attach into, again, the bone on the outside here, they'll attach into that bone. When you get a lot of muscles that attach into the bone, you'll have bursa, so things can kind of glide. Well, if these muscles get overworked, then what'll happen is it can inflame that bursa. So yeah, you have this bursitis, but you've got to get to like why. Why is that happening? Otherwise, it's not going to work. So you can go and do massage, and all the massage that you want to do, it's not going to work. And I'll tell you why here in a second. You can inject it. It's not going to work. And I'll tell you why here in a second. And you can go and do strengthening, and it's not going to work because we got to get down to why. Why is this happening? So let's go into what are some of the causes that could produce you having pain through here. A big reason of what happens is if you're getting pain in the hip or that hip can't move into hip extension, really, really common. So in order to, if you don't have that hip extension or and you have weakness in those hip extensors, what ends up happening is you shift your weight to the outside. You don't even realize that you do it, but you just kind of shift your weight a little bit to use the muscles on the outside because you're compensating because of weakness or lack of mobility that's happening in those big hip muscles. And so if that's causing that, again, we got to get to now, why is that happening? So there's several reasons why you could be compensating and shifting your body weight to the outside to really use these outside muscles that get overworked that then cause that inflammation in those tendons and in that bursa. So one is we always have to look at your back. So is there any stiffness in your back that's happening? Because if you're having some stiffness in the lower back, if I can't move the lower back and I try to extend the hip and that back can't move, that hip's not going to move either. And so you've got to improve the mobility. We always say mobility before stability. So where are we not moving? So if the back's not moving, you're going to have a harder time getting that hip to move. So you tend to move it to more of the outside, again, recruiting to the outside of these muscles because you're compensating because of a lack of mobility, a lack of hip mobility. So The other thing that can happen is you can have back issues that refer pain into that hip. When you get pain into that hip, you literally don't get those hip muscles to fire. They won't fire because you have pain there. They basically want to just tense up and protect. So we've got to look and see what's going on with the back first to see if there's any things that are making that hip act the way it's acting. So that's the first thing we have to look at. Another thing we have to look at is we have to look at your lower thoracic spine. The lower thoracic spine is up and through here in this part of the spine. And again, what happens is the muscles and the obliques and muscles that go from the ribs all the way down into the pelvis, if something's not moving here and this protects and tenses up, again, you're going to have a hard time getting that glute to fire. You're going to have a hard time getting that glute to move because the body's like, nope, 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 I don't want you to do it. When you can't move, then you're going to be going around and you're going to be using the muscles on the outside. You're going to be trying to use those hip extensors, but you end up using the lateral hip muscles that attach into the hip bone here where the bursa and all the tendons are. And so that's where we're going to have some issues. So we got to, again, look at that lower thoracic spine. The next thing that we have to look at is we have to look at your hip. So if we've ruled out all this stuff, then we look at the hip. Is the hip moving? If the hip is not moving, we've got to get the hip moving so that we can get those muscles to fire. Because again, lack of mobility, you're not going to be able to fire those muscles. If that hip can't move into extension, you're not going to be able to get those hip extensors moving. You're going to compensate by using the muscles on the outside of that hip. So we've got to look at that. Another piece is fibrosis. You can have fibrosis in those hips, like overuse of using it. It happens as we get older, and when that happens, you can't get those muscles to fire properly. You start getting pain on the outside of the hip. You can start getting pain in the front parts of this leg. And so we've got to look, is there a component of that? And we have treatments that we do to knock out that fibrosis. And then you can also just have general weakness, like everything is moving. Again, we go through mobility, then we go into stability. Everything is moving, but you just have generalized weakness that we need to address and get back, then we can address that piece as well. So there's a lot of factors that we look at in order to solve this problem. And the last thing that it can be is there can be a combination of things that are happening. So we can have a combination of a back and a hip, or a thoracic spine and a hip. And so we've got to look at that as well. And so that's why it's not just an easy thing of like, oh, just go and inject it. So if you have something happening in the back that's causing the hip and you inject the hip, well, guess what? You're just treating a symptom. It's not going to work. You go PRP injections into the hip, it's a symptom. It's not going to work. You've got to go figure out why all this is happening. Otherwise, you're just treating a symptom, which is why I always say the diagnosis is a symptom. It does not give you a game plan. You've got to get into someone that understands all these factors, that understand how they start ruling things in and ruling things out so that you can get real answers and a game plan of what to do. Now, other things, it's again, why massage won't hurt. Yeah, you have a lot of tightness, but if you aren't solving why it's tight, you're just treating a symptom. It's why massage doesn't work. It's why strengthening doesn't work, because if you don't understand why it's weak, is there something that's not moving? Is there compensation? Like you've got to look at those things first. And a lot of times you start doing strengthening things, it either doesn't work or you're doing all these exercises, but nothing's really firing. And you're like, my strength is the same. I don't understand. I've been working on this for a month with my physical therapist and nothing is working, or it's making me worse. Either or, it happens, it doesn't fire, or it makes you worse. And you're like, I don't understand why it's not working. Again, you got to get mobility before you get into stability. And so you've got to look at all these different factors. And that's why you aren't getting results. So we will talk about it in another video, some different things that we can do to solve hip bursitis. And we'll go through a lot of these different things that we look at and some things that you can do to start getting real lasting results. So if you've been told you have hip bursitis and the injection did not help and the massage did not help or the strengthening made things worse, it's because no one has found the real source of your compensation pattern. And if you want to finally figure out why your hip pain keeps on coming back, we offer a free discovery visit where we can look at your hip, your back, your mobility, and your glute activation, find out what the actual problem really is. Comment hit below or click on the link in the description to schedule your discovery visit. Don't settle for a misdiagnosis. Your hip pain has a solution when you know what to look for.